Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Fresh kicks, spring tops, new dresses. There's always a score.
I mean, the denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses.
I always find something amazing.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find can't-miss deals on all the spring things. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast. A bit of a losing streak pod this week with Cardiff on the back of 5 losses and a draw in this calendar year. Wales go down to a 16th test defeat at Scotland on Saturday. But better news for the Rags, who break their 7-game losing loss against Llandovery at Churchbank. Elsewhere, Ewan Lloyd is back. There's ticketing shenanigans. We discuss if any Cardiff players will make the plane for the Lions. And is it finally Teddy time for Wales this weekend?
You're listening to the Cardiff Central podcast.
I'm Dan on the podcast this week, joined as usual by Fraser. Fraser, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks, Dan. How are you doing?
All good, thank you. A couple of changes to the pod over the next few weeks. You'll notice we're without Harley, who's stepping back from doing the pod full time. You'll still hear him every now and again, but between the wrap and the women's pod, which I imagine will be pretty regular as the Women's Six Nations kicks off in a few weeks, plus his many guest podcast appearances elsewhere, he's running out of hours in the day. So we'll be introducing a bit of a pool of panelists going forward now to add some fresh voices. If you would like to become part of that, hit us up on Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, and we can provide the details. But on making his podcast debut this week, Simon Jones. Simon, how are you?
I'm not too bad. I've got the hours that Harley hasn't got. So. Yeah, great to be here.
Good, lovely. Thank you for joining us. We'll do a quick getting to know you piece, Simon. So, where does Cardiff rugby start for you? Where does supporting the Blue and Blacks come into play?
It starts in moving to the city in 2003, and I think Harley described this as a redemption arc of a storyline of. I was born in Llanelli and grew up as a Scarlet, and all my family are Scarlets, and. Left Llanelli at an early age and moved to Cardiff in 2003 and didn't know many people. Thought, well, I'd quite like to go and watch some live rugby, and came down the Arms Park. And what was the odd ticket turned into, I don't know whether you remember, they used to do memberships where you used to get like 20% off when you bought tickets. Those were the days. But moved on to that and moved on to season tickets then. Probably had a season ticket for the last 20 odd seasons, maybe. It feels like a long time. And some good away trips and met lots of people, yourself included, Dan, and taking it from there really. So I'm the blue and black sheep of the family really. I get plenty of grief when we usually lose to the Scarlets. So
a religious experience turning into the Arms Park and being converted.
yeah.
What's your favourite memory from that 20 years?
I think for me, I didn't manage to go to the European finals, but the EDF final against Gloucester, where we absolutely thumped them, was just fantastic. And still a lot of my friends talk about that day out down in Twickenham and coming back late. But probably earlier that season, we beat them in Gloucester when Tom James got sent off. Beaten with 14 men. I think it was a Bradley Davies try late on. And it was awful conditions, awful game. But going to Gloucester, being in the shed, having only 14 men and beating them, that was just fantastic. You know, I really enjoy going to Gloucester. It's a great trip, whether you win or lose. But when you win, it's something pretty special. And I love the spoiling the party. That was a great day out. But yeah, probably the EDF final was the most. Just you could relax, and we don't usually get to do that often as Cardiff fans. You just relax and think, oh crikey, this is unheard of. And the way we scored those tries as well, you know, and I think it just culminated that season. It was a pretty successful season. So yeah, it says a lot about my views of rugby that I'm picking kind of a turgid, hard-fought victory over Gloucester in the rain. I think on a Sunday as well. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. But yeah, loads. I mean, you know, been to Toulouse and to Paris, and you just get to. I just love the opportunity to go and speak to opposition fans as well, and how they see things. And it's a cliche, isn't it, about rugby values and stuff like that. And rugby certainly doesn't live up to it as much as people say it. But I think being able to go to some great away trips and just speak to people and share a bit of fun.
So I think Olivier Azam is still brushing off his Oscar from that performance against Tom Jones. So. And then the key questions that people want to know, two maybe three. Stand or terrace?
Terrace.
Good answer. North or south?
South.
Good answer. East or west?
Oh, I always get this with my season ticket. Taff End. What's that? East? West?
No, Taff End's of the west.
West.
2 out of 3, you know, almost 3 out of 3.
Yeah.
almost there, not too bad. Put you down with the rabble at the end.
Yeah, we're close to that.
Good stuff. Right, into rugby, or into news first of all. We're starting with Ewan Lloyd. Cardiff have announced that the fly half is coming back to the club, really. Former Cardiff under-16 player, Ysgol Glantaf pupil. He went across to Clifton College and Bristol, came through at the Bears before going to the Scarlets in 2023, where he's currently made 38 appearances, 221 points, and is the top point scorer in the URC so far this season. He's picked up 7 Wales caps along the way. Primarily will compete with Callum Sheedy at 10, although of course has played at centre, wing and fullback during his career so far. Fraser, come to you first. Good signing, bad signing?
I think it's a good signing, because I think Ewan Lloyd, I think we've discussed him before, is that the potential in him as a player is pretty substantial, and he's still only 23, so he still, I suppose, still is learning the game. And if he, you know, like you mentioned, he's been shifted around the back line at Bristol. When he came through, and he was like a bit of a superstar. He was just playing whenever they put him, and he was adept at playing a lot of different positions and suited their style of play. I think if he did get a run of games, I know he kind of has had a few games at 10 at Scarlets, and I think if he can develop the kind of calmness, not entirely like, you know, he's not the type of player who's going to just like dictate the game and you know, kick into corners and all that kind of stuff. But if he can just use a bit of that whilst also, you know, utilizing the skills he has, and his running game is pretty impressive. He's got that knack of like getting in a tackle and getting out of it. And he's not a big guy, but he's just got like quick feet. He can just like slide around, you know, slip through a tackle. I don't know. He's got like a skill set that not many people have. And if he can just, balance it a little bit and just be a bit more controlled in moments of pressure or just in clinch moments in games, then I think, you know, there's a brilliant signing. And I think, you know, what's give him a chance. I think with him and Sheedy interchanging is kind of a good swap there. And obviously Tinas Tabia might be leaving possibly, so we do need a 10 as well. So I think he'll suit our style of play. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I have faith in him. I want him to be brilliant, and I wanted him to like maximize potential. So here's hope he can do it back in Cardiff.
Yeah, Simon, similar question. Fraser mentioned there that about Tinas Tabia, he was conspicuously absent from the press release mentioning Ewan Lloyd in terms of competing at 10. So, yeah, thoughts on Lloyd? And I think the natural comparison will be, is he an upgrade or a downgrade or a sideways grade on Tabia?
Well, I think it feels like the club are taking a decision to free up, and I think you talked about this on the pod, free up non-Wales qualified places for those where they actually need it. And, you know, I mean, Tinas was great last season. Last season, in many ways, weirdly, was more fun than this season because I think expectations were a bit lower, and he came in and really overperformed. Just I remember the first game of the season, was it Treviso?
Yeah.
At home, where he went. I think the ball came off the back of we missed through a line out, which he'd probably get used to during the season, and he just threw himself up in the air to take this ball and I just remember turning to my friend and going, this guy's hard, because there was just no, kind of like, I'm going to protect myself. He just went for it, and to see that within the first half of his debut, you just thought, well, actually, this is a special player. And there's loads of really great memories. He came in at a time when the club was really struggling, and he's given everything. I mean, obviously his injury this season, it's derailed maybe any potential he had to win another contract, because we haven't really seen him. And I can't remember, is it in the injury, or is it I can't remember what it is, but he was heavily strapped up, I think, last time he came on. So it makes sense. It's sad in a way, but it makes sense. I think Fraser, I agree with you. If Lloyd can recapture some of where he was at Bristol, I think we'll have a top player on our hands. He's kind of Welsh qualified. Whatever happens with the kind of new agreement with the union, will Welsh qualified players give us a little bit more money? Will it mean that we have, a seen by the powers that be to be a little bit more in keeping with what the international coach wants? So I don't think he's a different player to De Beer. De Beer's a threat over the ball as well with his Jacqueline. He's different to Sheedy as well. So you could see that tight, games where maybe we need to chase it. We haven't seen as much of that kind of swapping at 10. I think that's just down to we haven't had people to come on at 10. But, where we maybe need to do something a little bit different, maybe you can. And, if you've got Ben Thomas outside you've got a bit more of a calming edge to that as well. So I think it can work. And as you say, Fraser, he's got that versatility. He can come in at 15 if we need him. I haven't really seen much of him at 12. I don't necessarily think he's big enough for 12 for the modern game, but I don't really think Ben Thomas was big enough, but he's worked on that power game. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not, I don't think it's one to kind of get bums on seats and necessarily sell season tickets, but I think there's something about the ethos that the club want, bringing Bowen in, bringing Emmanuel back, bringing Sheedy back. It's like, a direction of travel that the club want to go in. And yeah, it would just be interesting to see how he goes next season and how they use him with Sheedy as well, because Sheedy's had to play a lot of games and hasn't really missed that many through injury either, considering he's in his, what is he, 30, 31 now? 30.
It's a little bit younger than me, so I think he's late 20s.
Late 20s.
Yeah.
I think he's just been around for so long. I think he's older. But, he came with a bit of an injury concern around him, but he seems to have survived most of it. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he goes.
Absolutely. And I think like Fraser said, like Josh McNally's going to have nightmares in training, because it was Josh McNally who Ewan Lloyd went under, is the only way I can describe how he got through him against the Scarlets early in the season. But if there was a sort of archetypal jockey 10, then Ewan Lloyd would certainly be ticking a lot of those boxes. Where's my questions gone? Matt on Twitter asks, is this the last we've seen of Josh Adams? So a bit of injury and departure news this week. Adams, the first, has been released by Wales, having picked up a hamstring injury at training at the Vale. He's described it on Instagram as a bit of a gut punch. No confirmation of how long he's going to be out yet, but you don't usually describe a sort of 1 to 2 week hamstring ping as a gut punch. It sounds a little bit more, is it long term? Is it ruling out of Lions' chances? And then Talupe Faletau, Wales Online reporting last week that he's set to depart at the end of the season. Japan a possibility, but it seems front runners at the moment are Stade Niçois, which is Nice's current Pro D2 team, although they might end up in the third tier national. But despite that, they're very wealthy backers, put in a bit of money into a recruitment drive. They've been linked with Fiji captain Waisea Naisalevu, Owen Williams of the Ospreys, and now Faletau as well. Simon, I guess sort of this is like a question of each player individually, but altogether as well, there are two top earners at the moment. We sort of educated guess at the fact that they're probably on fairly top billing as Lions and experienced Wales internationals. With Faletau, good business decision, but perhaps disappointing to lose a player of that quality.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think I've loved his brief appearances for us. I think he's still quality. You saw that at the weekend, and he does. Again, when he's played for Cardiff and our scrum is not the strongest, shall we say, sometimes, and he just picks the ball up. I think his first game back against the Dragons, the scrum was going backwards in our 22, picked the ball up and he got above, got in front of where we actually scrummaged from. And he's just dreadful luck, isn't it, with injuries to him. And I understand it from a financial aspect for him. I don't think anyone can argue for him. He's given his all for Wales. He's been a fantastic servant. Get your payday when you can. It's a short career. The kind of heart in me goes, I'm gutted, because I think he's still got a lot to offer. I think actually for his career, whether he stands down after, whether he retires after the Lions tour or we'll probably come to that, but I think he'd probably be better looked after physically in Wales than he would be in France. How much does that play when you've got an amount of money on the table that could secure you? So I don't blame him at all. Don't blame the club at all. They've got to look at where we can make savings. So I think that will be sad. It'll be hugely missed. I think with Alan Lawrence, we've got somebody that's capable. Mackenzie Martin as well, in that space. He just locks out the scrum as well, which I think is really underrated. That we need a big 8. Cardiff have always needed a big 8 to lock the scrum, and he's done that brilliantly. Do you want to go on to Josh Adams or you don't?
Well, yeah, I'll flick it to Fraser for Josh Adams. I suppose that Adams is a different boat in that he's 4 or 5 years younger than Faletau, and young family, but in sort of similar fashion, has had his injuries and careers don't go on forever and ever. So I'm no doubt that there hasn't been any concrete links yet, but I've no doubt that there's decent monetary offers on the table from elsewhere if he was to become available. Is he one who's like more worth re-signing, or is that again a case of like, yeah, it'd be great to have him, but could we reinvest that money elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because obviously when he came back, when he's recently been back from his longer term injury, he's been brilliant, and he was getting better and better every game. And obviously, it's pretty gutting for Wales and Cardiff and obviously Josh Adams, of course, that he's got this injury because he was just looking like he'd rediscovered what made him special as a winger, or what makes him special as a winger quite recently, and he was adding a lot to our performances, and it was pretty impressive. I think it would be a loss if he was to go, but obviously his injury problems, could they be ramping up a little bit with? I mean, he's 29, he's not old, but it seems like he's getting injured a bit more frequently. Could we reinvest it in someone a bit younger? I don't know, but I would hope to stick with him. I think he obviously could choose to go pretty much anywhere. I'm sure he'll have a lot of offers, but I think, like you mentioned about management of the player, it would be good if he stayed at Cardiff and could get managed in that sense, game time, and gradually put back into the team, because we don't want to get rid of every kind of player like that. He's a star name. Same with Faletau. Fair enough, he's 34. Do what you want essentially. You've got freedom. You can go to Nice Pro D3 or whatever, have a nice holiday with your family. He's in everything and so is Josh as well. But I think we need to keep some of these star names. But then again, I guess it depends on who we'd reinvest in. But I think there's definitely a reason to stick with Josh and give him the chance to recover and see what he can do if he comes back for the rest of this season. And I'd say invest to keep him here next season as well.
Yes, tricky decisions, isn't it? The recruitment retention ones. There's just very little money around. You feel for Darren Allinson and co. And I think particularly with Adams, it'll be one of those ones that it'll only really be in hindsight that you will know exactly what the right decision was, because the pros and cons list is very equal at the moment around him. But I think the point on superstars is a salient one. Faletau has earned his right to head off, but we do need to keep a bit of star power there. That those guys make, even if Adams isn't playing, he makes money commercially by sort of doing your sponsorship bits and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, well, there was a late question from Mark on Twitter as well about who would be a good signing in the Type 5. We'll come on to the like actual names and stuff. For Simon, just quickly, is that the only recruitment priority essentially with that money? Is that where you would put it back into?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where every Cardiff fan would put it in the last since Paul Tito retired, basically. But I think just on the Josh Adams point, I think as well, the one thing I've noticed about is what an incredible leader he is on the pitch as well, in terms of organising the players around him. It was obvious in that kind of Misfits game where he was playing kind of inside centre. He was, moving the kind of younger players around and everything. But every game he's talking to those inside him. And, I agree, Fraser, if you're going to lose a Talupe, trying to retain that level of knowledge and experience, and somebody who's not just experienced but vocal with it, is really important. It's kind of like we're pretty well stacked on the wings, to be honest. It looks like going into next season, we may lose a few. I don't know, kind of contract situations with people, but it doesn't feel like it's a position that's crying out for it. But I think we're crying out for his leadership and his attitude towards playing, and training and stuff like that. You just get the sense that he's respected. I think we keep signing backs and and back row players, and I think everybody's kind of like going, yeah, but we need something in the Type 5. I think Matt Nally's been fantastic this season, but he's obviously on the wrong side of 30 for us to get much more out of him. Although he can keep going, but I think it is something like that. If the rumours that we've read about kind of Seb Davis and things like that, there's space, and I think that's the worry, is you need just hard-working players in that area, I think, because we've got players that can do the magic stuff around. You just need players, I think, that will hit rucks and clear out and scrummage and lift in lineouts and secure ball and tackle. It doesn't need to be I don't think we're looking for a superstar in that area. I think we're just looking for some really strong players that can preferably be available throughout the season and offer that leadership, particularly if we're losing more experienced players or, not renewing contracts around that.
Good stuff. Just to finish off the news then, bit of ticketing shenanigans over the last few days. First one is that on Wednesday, that'll be the 12th, the season tickets for 2025-26 are going to be released by the club. We're anticipating a slight increase, but nothing too much, sort of in line with inflation. Looks like it's going to be some sort of mammoth theme, the BBC Wales comedy starring Mike Bubbins, former Barry boy and former Cardiff youth and Cardiff fan. And then whilst they're selling next season tickets, this season tickets appear to have expired. If you have a digital season ticket, either on Apple Wallet or on whatever the Google Android equivalent of that is, you'll have noticed last week that the QR code's disappeared and it's showing as expired. Now, the club say they are aware of it and working with Ticketmaster to rectify that, but I feel somewhat like the club have given up on this season. They're selling next season tickets and we'll come back in September. Moving on to rugby stuff then, do a bit of Cardiff stuff. Obviously no game for the first team last weekend, but Fraser and Simon, as we have you on, and we've not discussed the Leinster game with either of you. Fraser first. Quick thoughts on Leinster 42, Cardiff 24 from the week before last?
I think we played pretty well. Obviously it was a Cardiff game. We played well in parts. It was pretty close at half time. We let it slip away and then we came back a bit. I mean, it wasn't too bad. I think we had some good performance. I thought Rory Thornton had a great game, and it really impressed me with his handling as well. I I just assume he's like a workhorse, that kind of person who just solidifies the line and that kind of stuff. But I think he really played well in the loose. And then similarly, I think when Seb Davis came on, he made a big difference. He really impressed me. And obviously, he might be leaving, which is a shame. But I thought I'd give him a shout out. I think we had some really good periods of defence, like an amazing defence. I think it was just before half time we conceded that try, and we defended so well for like 5 minutes. Like it was a substantial amount of time on our lines, putting our bodies on the line, and managed to get that turnover, and then somehow almost immediately fucked it and gave them a penalty, and they went to the corner and scored. And it was I think that was a real blow there because we went in behind, I think, at half time and we played really well to stay in it. And I think Leinster were a bit surprised about how well we'd done. And yeah, our defence was brilliant, but you can only hold out for so long, I suppose, and it took its toll. And then they got their pressure told, they got their tries. But again, we scored some nice tries and we played pretty well in parts, but it was similar to a lot of our games this season where we're there or thereabouts, similar to the games last season as well. It's creeping back towards that kind of, we've got the potential, we're doing really well in parts, but then we don't have the possession for long enough, or we make silly mistakes still, and it's strength and depth as well. I know the bench came on, I think some errors crept in. But yeah, overall, I was pleasant. I was pleased that we were in it for as long as we were. But I'm obviously it's getting a bit worrying, as you mentioned earlier, Dan, about like 5 losses in a row. It's kind of a little bit. We'd love to stop the rot, but obviously against Leinster away, that's not the game you're going to stop the rot. So if you're thinking about it in just that performance against Leinster, I think it was pretty solid, and you can build on it. So yeah, I think that was my general opinion on that game, and I enjoyed watching it. It was good fun.
Simon, like as Fraser says, it's 5 losses in a row, 5 losses in a draw this calendar year. Now we haven't won in 2025. Is it dangerous to slip into last season's mentality of being brave losers? Or is it, is there sort of narrative to it around the opposition we faced and the fact we've tried to mix our team up and also had internationals unavailable? Are we concerned, or is it bigger picture stuff?
Well, I think after the Connacht game, I would have been concerned because I think it's just frustrating this season because we're in those games. We get ourselves, inevitably, we start off pretty poorly sometimes and we get ourselves back into games. We got ourselves back into that game against Leinster. We had a kick to the corner. We overthrew the line out, or I think they stole the ball, from the line out So I think it's frustrating that it feels more competitive, but as you say, Fraser, we're just making mistakes at the wrong time. I mean, the yellow card was just a killer, really. I think it was the try after half time where we had a ruck on halfway and all the forwards just wrapped round and ran past the ruck and there was no scrum half. And they turned the ball over and then broke from there and I think scored their try. And I can't remember whether it was the yellow card or something like that. But it's things like that are happening where it's just that one moment. And whatever side Leinster put out, they're going to be clinical. They're just going to be direct and they're going to run hard, they're going to have a good shape behind, and obviously the money's talked about a lot in terms of what Leinster can put in, but it is impressive how no matter who comes into the team, their shape is still the same. What you're going to get, everybody fits in. But in saying that, I thought we had them in trouble at points. They looked a bit panicked. They looked, I've seen Leinster third teams come down and swat Cardiff aside pretty comfortably, but we did have them panicking and worrying at times, and scored some lovely, really lovely scores. That little offload from Sheedy to win it to put him in the space. We were in that game. You can't concede a yellow card in Dublin because they're probably one of the most clinical teams, regardless of who puts out what team they put out about. Scoring during those periods, and it took the game away. For the rest of the game, it was pretty even. I think, as you said, Dan, I think for the first time our centres looked their age, if that makes sense. I mean, Lilo is a phenomenal player and an absolute club legend, but for the first time, the two in the centre looked a bit leggy when breaks were being made and falling off tackles a little bit. But from my perspective, a point in Dublin is a point harder, and their first try scoring bonus point they've conceded this season, I think, at home. It's what you'd expect. I think Connacht the week before was frustrating because you could have I felt we could have got something more there. 5 defeats on the bounce isn't the best, but we always knew this part of the season was going to be the hardest, so we had to get the wins before Christmas, really. But massive game against the Lions coming up. I think I think that if we can get a win there, suddenly 2 points away in Ireland during the Six Nations doesn't look so bad. Lose that one, and it's a bit more like, right, okay, the playoffs are gone really.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll obviously preview the Lions game next week. But yes, that is potentially the biggest game of the season so far. Well, into 2 weeks of huge games really with the Lions, and then into that Connacht European knockout game. I think those are two season-defining games in terms of whether we see it as a positive or negative overall. More positive, though, for the Rags this weekend. They were in Super Rugby Cymru action, went up to Llandovery, as I mentioned at the top of the show. 7 losses in a row to the Drovers in all competitions, dating back to October 2022. But a quite remarkable scoreline of 52-19 win up there. There was all tries scored by the backs as well. 2 tries for Joe Goodchild, 2 tries for Oshan Darwin Lewis. The inevitable 2 tries for Derry Cross, who takes his tally, I think it's 49 in 53 now for the Rags, which is just ridiculous, really. And then Matty Young returning at fullback as well, who looked like he had an absolute brilliant game. 17 points for Josh Thomas off the boot. Interesting to see Mackenzie Martin in the second row. I think there was some debate about that on socials, but I don't think that's a long-term move. I fancy that was more Llandovery got one of the best packs in the league, and so whacking his weight in the second row can't hinder your scrum at all. And from a couple of people who were there I've spoken to, suggested that we certainly battered them up front. So the Rags go top of SRC, although Ebu do have a game in hand, but it's well on the way to a home playoff for them. And then in just a bit of other development pathway news, the under-20s have been plodding along. Great win over Ireland. Disappointing loss against Scotland on Friday. Lots of cards, including a red card for future Cardiff pathway lock Tom Cottle, which I don't quite profess to understand the laws, but why that was a full red card and not a 20-minute red card when the other one was a 20-minute red card, I don't really understand. Simon, we spoke that Tom Bowen looked excellent. You noticed that perhaps there's one area of the game that he's not so good at.
But yeah, I was watching the game back because I was on bedtime story reading duty, and I went up to read my daughter's bedtime story, and we were like, I think Scotland had just scored their try, but I thought, we've got this. We were comfortably kind of better than them, and came back down. We conceded 2 red cards, but I just know just before I think what was really interesting, even after the red cards, it still felt like we were turning them over. We were winning penalties. We were getting in field position, and obviously they were held up. And just before half time, we had those kind of 3 scrums, 2 resets, and then the penalty against the Welsh scrum. But I think the first 2 that Tom Bowen put the ball in, he rocketed it into the scrum, and it just came flying back out. And I think for the 3rd scrum, I think it was Johan Emmanuel was just like talking to him a bit more like, no, you kind of feed it in. I don't know. It was the fact he just came bouncing. I was like, he seemed to throw that in really hard and then like run around the back of the scrum. So, I mean, but he's, what a talent. That first break that he made just showed what he's capable of. And what I took from it as well, and took from seeing him this season, he's really brave as well. He will take a hit. He doesn't, sometimes he knows he's just going to get smashed. And I think there was he got taken in the air and he just got up from it. There was no kind of like, oh, I'm going to like just take a minute on the ground to get my wind back. He just kind of like got up and got, and when you're the size that he is, and with the pace that he's got and changing angles, you're going to need that. And I think that bodes really well. But yeah, a really weird performance. I didn't think Scotland were that great. That second red card, it was just, it just reminded me of what Alex Ferguson said to Eric Cantona after he'd gone into the stands at Selhurst Park. You can't be doing that, son. Yeah. It's that kind of like, he's not trying to block the ball. He's just run, and especially with a lock on a scrum half, you're always going to be in trouble. And he's not blocking the ball. He's just running a straight line. It's just, it was frustration maybe about where the game was going. I think the first one, there was an element of unluckiness in the first one, I think, because I think the winger came in when the scrum half was trying to clear out and kind of knocked him a bit, that pushed him onto the leg. But it's a dangerous clear out. You're going to give the referee a decision. It's rightly read. We know as Cardiff fans the impact that can have on players' careers. I think it was with DuPont at the weekend. So yeah, it was one of those games where you just kind of could have, should have, would have, but didn't. So let's move on. But wasn't particularly worried. I think if we kept 15, we probably would have won that, because I don't think Scotland offered a huge amount.
So the headline is the Tom Bowen basically does everything quickly, including feeding. Just does things faster. Imagine him like lobbing cereal in his breakfast bowl in the morning at a million mile an hour.
Getting digested
everywhere.
Moving on to the senior game then, for the final part of the pod, for Wales's men's team. They went down 35-29 Scotland at Murrayfield on Saturday. A scoreline which doesn't really tell the sort of the whole story of the game, as it was of course 35-8 with 20 minutes to go, and then Wales coming back into it at the end with a bit of impact from the bench. Fraser, general thoughts on the game and for the Cardiff lads as well, particularly for Benny, Azarati and Teddy off the bench. What did you make of it?
So my general thoughts, it's kind of hard. I find it hard to kind of assess as a performance, because we were so bad that for 50 minutes we were really shit, and it was like it was really reminiscent of the France match and the Italy match. It felt like it was that kind of, there was a lack of pace. I like the lines of running and the dummy runners were really slow, and it just like every attack we had just petered out and ended up getting a turnover. And it just felt like this inevitability every time we had the ball, and it just, obviously we had glimmers, the try that Blair Murray scored with Anscombe with the kick through, but for 50 minutes, 55 minutes, we really did look like we were before, and like we hadn't made any progress, and it was quite worrying and a little bit depressing. It was that pit of the stomach depression I was having against Italy was coming back, and I was like starting to have a look, oh god, no, we haven't made any progress. But obviously they took off Finn Russell and a few key players, and I think without Finn Russell, Scotland are completely different. So I mean, he's such a good player, and the way he spots space and the way he like dictates play for them is unbelievable, and he is just, yeah, he's just a brilliant player. So he came off, and Scotland got a bit disjointed. I think they had some, I mean, we defended really well on the line, but they could have probably scored in those moments, but they didn't make the right decisions, and we defended really well, held up the ball and stuff. And obviously then we played quite well. We had some moments of positive attacking play. I won't go on about the Faletau try, Blair Murray jumping over the guy, because I was so jazzed about that try. I was so gutted to get it disallowed. Obviously, yeah, the rules say it was disallowed and all that, but that was unreal. But yeah, I think we had good moments, and obviously, like you said, for the Cardiff players, Teddy Williams came off the bench. He looked good, dynamic, made some forward momentum, got his try, which I was really happy for him about. Azarati looked quite solid, dependable. I mean, he didn't do anything special, but I haven't looked at the stats, so I don't know how many rucks he cleared and all that kind of stuff, but he looked okay in the scrum. Ben Thomas was a mixed bag. I did find the Blair Murray Thomas mix up I actually kind of funny. I don't know, it was like cathartic. I was like laughing after that because it was so stupid. It was like, oh yeah, of course you've knocked on. Oh yeah, they scored a try. It was like a really kind of amusing how bad it was, and it kind of compounded how bad the whole first half had been. I was like, yeah, fair, that seems about right as to how we were playing. But then he did kind of keep going. He's got really, I think Ben Thomas has got a really good mentality. He doesn't, he's had some shock, like when he played at 10, that was a really bad performance, but I don't think it affects him. He doesn't seem to have that. He's got a really strong belief in self-confidence, and I really respect that, and I think that's going to serve him really well for continuing to play for Wales moving forward, because if you have that mentality, and I think if he plays in the right teams, he's going to do really well. And I think, Simon, you mentioned it earlier about like there was the doubt of his physicality when at 12 initially, and then there was that one run where he gouged the player's eyes or whatever, or possibly. But that was a tremendous, like the power and the pace he put on that, and the bravery to run like that line at that pace into like doing Van der Merwe. Like, fair play to him. And I thought he played mixed bag, but played quite well. Aside from that, I just shout out to Faletau as a player. His what impressed me about him is his work rate and his fitness to, like, obviously the Blair Murray, to be on the end of that, like coming from nowhere, there he is. And just in general, he was just brilliant throughout the game. And yeah, he's just a exceptional player, and he'll be very, very missed whenever he stops playing for Wales or Cardiff, because I love seeing him, and he's such a paragon of rugby skill and quality and temperament. I'm really, really impressed by him. But yeah, I think that's my overall assessment of it. I just hope, I mean, we'll go on to England. I think maybe go back to the Ireland performance is what I'd like to see, because this one is hard to judge, I think.
Simon, your thoughts on the game, and obviously Fraser mentioned it there, and you spoke earlier about Faletau. He's not bad, is he? For an old bloke, like, still going around like a Rolls Royce. And the question then becomes, well, Cardiff have got a long history of supplying Lions players. I think we're still the most in history when it comes to how many players we've sent on Lions tours. At one point, it was looking like we might not have anyone this summer. But is he on your plane?
I mean, he would for me. I just think even if he's like the midweek team, I think he brings a lot of experience. If a player goes down, it's a funny tour, isn't it? It's Australia, and it's I'd be surprised if I think it would be if the Lions didn't win that series, you'd kind of go, well, what's going on there? I know Australia are on the resurgence, but you would have thought that the teams and the qualities coming together, even if you just made it from England and Ireland, and had a few smattering of Scots and maybe Jack as well. But I think he would. It was I agree with you, Fred. It can't mask how poor we were for that first 50 minutes. I don't think Scotland had to work hard for their tries, really. Thomas Williams bites in for the first one, that he kind of like comes in and then kind of looks to see who's outside him, and it's like the winger, and he's like, oh, and you can see him just that moment of, I've made a mistake, and Gareth Anscombe's not getting to what's the fullback's name? It's gone. Blair
Kinghorn, yeah.
Kinghorn there. So I don't think they had to work particularly hard for their tries, which I think was disappointing. I mean, what Will Griff-John was doing is beyond me. I think I don't think there were many scrums in I just get the feeling, when I'd have to go back and look at the stats, it probably proved me wrong, but it didn't feel like there were many scrums in the first half. And I think, my takeaway from the Ireland game, there were a lot of like technical infringements at the scrums. It was like slipping the bind, and it was more about, I think, the Irish front row scrummaging style than we kind of turned on the power and were driving them back. And I think, it didn't quite work. And obviously that yellow card was relatively costly as well. So I think there's a spot up for grabs at tight head for the England game. But I think Ben Thomas's try was a lovely try. Shows a Cardiff player can score near the posts as well, which is my scientific bugbear, that we always score tries out wide and give Sheedy the hardest possible kicks at goal. But if he hadn't scored that as well, I think there were 3 or 4 outside of him. But cutting in on that angle, you can see Jockey's coaching there, because Lilo scored a similar try to the Llewellyn try, coming back against the grain out in Connaught. So did we keep fighting? Yeah. If this had still been under Gatlin, would we have shipped more points? Yeah, I think we would have. I think the confidence had gone completely. But and the Blair Murray Ben Thomas mix up, you just kind of like just catch the ball and go into touch. Just catch the ball. Great to try stuff, but even there, you're kind of like, he wasn't close enough to do that. And I think the ruck before, there was like the referee was telling the Scotland winger to kind of like let go as well, and it was kind of like slowing that ball down. So I don't know whether there was a bit of panic of, it's still on, when it just wasn't on anymore either. But I think at the moment you've just got to take the positives out of it and go, it's we were within 6 points, within 7 points, sorry. Some nice scores, lovely, as you said, Dan, lovely Blair Murray score from Anscombe's kick, and you just go, okay, we move on. England next, that's going to be a completely different game. But I thought Finn Russell looked really sheepish picking up that cup at the end. I think he realised that he looked a bit kind of like, not we got away with one, but the level of performance meant that it was quite flat. I think, for them towards the end.
That brings me on nicely to my one point that I've written down about the game, less about the game itself, more about the wider context and about Welsh rugby landscape generally, is that there's sort of an bubbling undercurrent always of Welsh rugby going down to 2 teams at club level. And you just look at that Scotland team on the weekend, and this is their golden generation, so we're told, by Scotland themselves, not from outside. This is as good as it's ever been for them, the best team they've ever had. And the lack of depth, I mean, some of the guys they were bringing off the bench there made them noticeably a worse rugby team. Like, they had nothing there. Wales was so much better towards the end of that game. They lost the last 20 minutes 21-0 Scotland, and that's what the future for Wales would be with 2 club teams. There's no depth there. The maximum amount of Welsh qualified, or as it is for Scotland, Scottish qualified players you can get out on a weekend there definitely is 46, because you can mandate that your 2 teams only have Welsh or Scottish players. You can't control if they're signed or selected by teams outside of your country. And so if you're picking a 38-man squad, then you're only leaving 8 players behind who are playing week in, week out. Whereas at least with Wales, we're underfunding our teams and we're not very competitive, but we're getting a lot of players good minutes. There's good competition there. There's good depth. It's just, Scotland, they were slightly better than us in the scrum for the first hour, and then they were much worse than us in the last 20 minutes. Their line out went to pot. Defensively, they had nothing, and we looked. Obviously, there's context of the game that it was pretty much won, and they maybe sat up a bit, and we had nothing to lose, so Jared Evans was able to play a bit more freely and move the ball around. But we just were a better team, and for Scotland, this is their golden generation. Compare that to Wales's golden generation. The last lot, we won Grand Slams, Six Nations, World Cup semi-finals. Scotland are sort of perennial winners of the 3rd place cup, and their tagline is just the hope that kills you, really, because they tell us they're going to win the Grand Slam every year and they've never got near it. So that Murray Thomas thing was very funny. You could put circus music to that. And I thought, like, the attack in the first hour, Jockey talks about taking the brave option, like backing the players to be brave with ball in hand. I didn't think we did that very much, with the exception of doing it in our own 22 when like massively under pressure.
When you shouldn't have.
Like, it just that was a weird one. And then the Will Griff John yellow card is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But not to linger on any refereeing, but there was the most obvious Hugh Jones knock on I think I've ever seen, about 2 phases before that, which no one seemed to talk about like afterwards.
I was shouting at the screen about that. I was like, what's going on? Like,
I think Jack Morgan mentioned it to the ref, but it just, like, even Hugh Jones like sort of hit the floor in frustration that he knocked it on, and then we just carried on. I don't know what happened there, but it was an odd game, certainly. We go now then into Super Saturday, last game of the Six Nations. Wales are playing England at the Principality Stadium, 4:45 kickoff, the middle game of the day. Fraser, come to you on team changes that I've listed quite a few positions actually where he might consider it. I think you've got hooker. Does Dewi Lake come back in potentially? Obviously, we've mentioned tight head that Will Griff John did the quickest 0 to 0 transition that you've ever seen after being lauded against Ireland and absolutely destroyed at Scotland. Would you make any changes in the front row there?
I think maybe stick with Dewi Lake on the bench. I think I was listening to the Scrumfied podcast. I think Ellis Jenkins made the point. I mean, it's quite an obvious point, but it's the fact that he's been injured for quite a long time. It's quite a serious injury. So I think maybe give him another half an hour off the bench, something like that. Because Elliot D wasn't terrible. He's a solid, dependable player. And I think the impact that Dewi Lake can bring off coming onto the pitch is pretty substantial with his power and tired bodies. I think he'd make a difference there, and especially with England, they're such a big pack, it might be good to have like a proper good solid bench coming on when needed. In terms of Will Griff John, he's the rise and fall of him. It's so funny. It's quite funny. I'm tempted to give him a go again because he looks quite funny as well. He's so well built. His legs are so huge. He's just an amusing person, I think, in just the way he looks with his moustache bald. I don't know. Why not give him another go? See if the island thing was the anomaly, or which it does seem like that might be the case. But yeah, I wouldn't be if Azarati started. That makes sense as well. But I'm tempted to have faith in him. I think I'm going with like more stick to what we have. So maybe Rowlands. I mean, we'll go on to the rest of the pack, I guess. I think I'd probably stick with
Go on. Go on.
Yeah, go
That's the question from a Cardiff perspective. Then is it Teddy time?
I mean, I don't think it would be a massive. I think playing Teddy would be great. Why not? But yeah, I would also still be tempted to keep with Will Rowlands because again, his impact off the bench, Teddy was brilliant. I'd like to see Teddy get a start just because as a Cardiff fan, and I think he's been so brilliant for us this season, and he has earned it through his performances. It wouldn't be unjust at all. But I think it's that kind of we've settled with a team for one game and then we have a worse performance and then make loads of changes again. I don't know. I think have faith. Will Rowlands, he wasn't great, but then none of the team were great and we were just seemed all off the pace. So I think maybe stick with Rowlands again, give Teddy another chance off the bench. But I don't know what you guys say. I'm not like set in stone on that. It's a bit kind of vibe based, but I don't know what you guys are, what your thoughts on that.
Simon, is it Teddy over Rowlands? And then does that link into discussion about the back row a little bit as well with the balance there? I think Tommy Reffell had a quiet game. I think it would be fair to describe it as, and Wainwright came off the bench and had a bit of impact. So any back five pack changes for you there?
Yeah, I mean, there's risk. I agree. I think Teddy Williams deserves a start. Whether the England game is the right start or whether we're starting fresh over the summer, and that's the point to kind of go when maybe we do have a few players on a Lions tour to go right. New coach, all being hopefully, but Jockey might still be doing a secondment over the summer as well. Who knows? But maybe they'll rotate it around the regional the professional coaches. They're all doing a job share for one part of the international calendar. But I think, I mean, where he's criticised about being kind of rangy and not strong enough, the try he scored, he bounced the prop, spun out the tackle, really, knew where he was as well to be able to reach and score. It wasn't kind of like a canter in or close to the line. He had some work to do. And I think that's really come on this season, his kind of physicality. We're seeing him a little less out in the the wide open spaces and more in the kind of boiler room alongside McNally. So I'm kind of less worried about that. I think the issue maybe is that, if you have Rowlands on the bench, he's not going to come on and shift the game. Teddy can probably come on and offer something completely different to shift the game. So I think, it's almost like whenever we've put Talupe on the bench for Cardiff or Thomas Young, it's kind of like it doesn't work particularly. They're starters for me rather than adding value. So I think that is in the equation as well. Do you just kind of try and keep it as close as you can with what will always be a good England's, a good England scrum and a well drilled line out. I think it was maybe a little bit wobbly at the weekend, but I didn't see the game. But I'd almost be tempted to go start with Rowlands, bring on Teddy Williams, start completely afresh in the summer with like Teddy Williams, Jenkins, second row combination. Out is Japan we're touring in the summer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you'll need that. So I think that is it. Wilcriffe, John. Yeah, go on. It's like it's that kind of like, well, we're not blessed at tight head, so you kind of like you've got Azarati. Either way, one of them's going to play 50 odd minutes. I think probably what it will come down to is when you make those changes, or when Jockey makes those changes, and I think that's maybe this is why this kind of sabbatical is good for Cardiff, because there's been question marks over he brings players on quite late sometimes, and they can't really affect the game. That in international level it goes up a level, and you've got more in your arsenal to be able to deploy, and maybe he comes back with a bit of extra knowledge and extra insight of how you do that. So it's going to be a tough my bigger concern is I think the ball's going to be in the air a lot. I glibly said on social media that Scotland won because they were simply taller than Wales. But I think England do try to own the skies as well, and I think that for our back three is going to be quite key, to be honest.
That's I think the substitute point's a really good one. It kind of brings on to I had a note about fly half as well. Obviously, always you have to discuss who's going to play 10 for Wales. I think it's contractually obliged for Welsh people, but there's a bit of social media clamour for Jared to be starting after his 20-minute cameo on the weekend. But yeah, I think the lesson there probably is more get Jared on at 50 minutes and let Anscombe try and control that 50 minutes a bit better rather than Jared starting. Frazier Simon mentioned it there about back three. We do seem to have the Oompa Loompas of the back three in World Rugby at the moment. Like Blair Murray, absolutely fantastic counter-attacker. Got Tom Rogers obviously injured at the moment, but Ellis Mee is a bit taller but not as defensively strong. Cam Winnett could have come in, also quite short. Is there what is the back three answer there? Because counter-attacking is great, but if you can't win aerially, you can't win games pretty much. And as Simon said, if England go with a Freddie Stewart or I'm trying to think of the name of the other back, Furbank, who's also quite tall, in the back three there, we might just not have any ball if they just batter it up in the air. What is there an obvious answer for Wales, or do we just have to try and deal with what we got at the moment?
I think it's tricky because obviously Tommy Rogers is now injured. Because Tommy Rogers and Ellis Mee, I'd seen them earlier in the season. They're pretty good in the air, generally speaking. They're not like weak aerial players. And I think Ellis Mee is quite tall. Tommy Rogers just can jump very high, I think, and also is brave. But obviously Rogers is out. Blair Murray is he's just a small man, so I don't think you can't change that. And as brave as he might be, he's going to lose out in the air, especially if they play Freddie Stewart. I mean, that's and if he's going up against them. So I guess it depends on, with Rogers out, obviously Adams is out. I wonder who the other winger is going to be, because is it, I guess, Josh Hathaway? Is he going to come in?
The only, they haven't announced that they've called anyone up. So the only real fit back three players are Hathaway, excuse me, Hathaway, Mee and Murray. There has been some suggestion about whether Anscombe could play at full back, but I fancy his legs just aren't there to cover the backfield anymore. So yes, is it just going to be a case of maybe we could drop Faletau into the backfield and line out lift Murray every time the ball comes towards him?
I think sorry, Fraser.
No, go on.
I think Llewellyn moving to wing is the other option, in terms of his height. And we've got a few centres who probably deserve a run out. The two lads at the Scarlets probably deserve, some game time. They've been relatively good for them this season. They, distribution and passing. I think, Ben Thomas is going to play 12, I think, because Jockey trusts him. And as you say, he's grown into games even when he's made mistakes. But I could see a situation where they move Llewellyn into the wing. He scored tries. He's a good finisher. He's strong. You could still, Jockey uses Mason Grady in that roaming role from the wing, where he kind of brings him in to the centre. So you could see, that happening. I've got to be honest, whenever I've seen Hathaway, I don't think he sets the world alight. I'm not I'm a bit what does he bring that others don't? Or I'm not particularly sold on him, but he's only played a couple of times, to be honest, and in very difficult circumstances for Wales in terms of, what's going on around him. So, you've got to give him a chance. But I would, if it was me, I'd probably be more inclined, even though Llewellyn and Thomas, I think, have gone really well as a centre pairing. I think it shows the oversight of not picking him was just ridiculous. But I'd be more tempted to move him to the wing, bring someone in at inside centre, and use Llewellyn kind of off the wing in the centre of the pitch, like Grady's been used for Cardiff. Then just have whoever's fit. You could put Hathaway on the bench, I guess, because he can cover full back as well, can't he? But I agree. I'd bring Jared on for the last 30 minutes. I don't think England are the type of team to start with that level of creativity, because I just don't. I think they'd suffocate him.
Yeah. Is Liam Williams definitely injured for this match?
Yeah, I think he's done for a little while by the sounds of it.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with Simon. Yeah.
It is a bit of an eye opener about sort of lack of depth we've got at fullback at the moment. I think in the country, obviously there are good players there. I think Max Nagy's got a bit of talent about him at the Ospreys, and obviously, as is like we discuss weekly on the pod, sort of when does Jacob Beetham finally get his chance to go regularly at Cardiff?
That's because you keep saying he should be an inside centre.
Well, yeah, there is that as well, doesn't it? I don't help the Wales national team, but just him playing would be good at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Fraser, just to finish off, then last question for the pod. Obviously, is hopefully for us, Jockey's last game as Wales coach this weekend. What constitutes success for him? Do they need to win? Is obviously that would be massive for him, but can he still say that he's had a successful few weeks if they put in another sort of brave loss against England?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's already been successful in his tenure because he was kind of on a no loss situation unless we'd somehow got worse than where we were, because I don't know how he would have done that. But I think that Ireland performance was that inspired a lot of people and gave a lot of people renewed faith in the Welsh national team, and that means a lot. That like reinvigorates people, got like a hope as to things can get better. And I think the main thing about that match was just like showed people that the players are good enough. So there was all this doubt about like, oh well, the Welsh, we don't have enough players. They're not up to the right standard. We'll never get that team again. It was this golden age that we'll never get those players that we had back then. And maybe we won't get as good as those, but we still got a good set of players who could do better, and they showed in that match they can do better. Obviously, Scotland was a bit iffy, but we came within a score, a converted try of bringing it back. So again, there's a kind of a positive end to that. And I think if we can put up a fight against England, I think, yeah, obviously we get absolutely smashed. I think there'd be question marks raised about how that happened. But if we can do similar to what we did against Ireland, I'd love a win. But if we could stay in it for 70 minutes, 65 minutes, and a close loss or whatever, I think that'd still be a success for Matt Sherratt. I think Jockey's come into a really difficult situation like he did at Cardiff, and has done well and kind of picked the team as like I'd guess we might have picked the team and kind of ignored Gatland's weird issues and like hang-ups over who should play what position, apart from Sam Parry, obviously. Stuck with that. You still hates him. But yeah, I think he's been successful, and I think you mentioned, Simon, about him coming back into Cardiff. It will be interesting to see what learnings he's had as a coach of a tier one nation rugby team in a very pressurized environment, and kind of what learnings he's had in that circumstance that he can take and bring back to Cardiff. I'm excited to see, because he must learn something in that circumstance, and like the extra pressure, the media, all this kind of stuff is only going to help him as a coach, I imagine. So I'm saying it's already been quite successful, and unless barring something awful happening on Saturday, I think, yeah, I'm pretty positive about the work he's done, and he should be proud of the kind of effort he's put in.
You wonder as well whether he'll come back with like a bit more respect in like the game as well, because I think what he's done is he's turned around a culture that just wasn't working. From an outsider perspective, it looked like the coaching team had lost the dressing room. The tactics weren't really there. Whatever they were being told to do, they either didn't believe it or didn't know how to kind of deliver it. You had all the things about players being dropped and not being used to being in successful environments and things like that. And you had all that deflection. It was, it just seemed like culturally it wasn't right. I agree with your phrase. What he's done is just made us all want to watch Wales again. Actually, whether we win or lose, I'd stop watching them, because it was just kind of like, what you're going to get. It's not going to be enjoyable. But we pushed Ireland hard. Yeah, we were poor for 50 minutes against Scotland, but kind of we all left the match with a bit of a spring in our step, going, oh, we can score tries. And actually, if Blair Murray had just swerved rather than hurdled, would we have won that game? Obviously we wouldn't have. But yeah, I just wonder whether other, when we're looking to recruit players now, they're looking at the coach that we've got and kind of going, well, he seemed to have done something in terms of galvanizing the players and galvanizing a team that was lost, and will that kind of add to people wanting to come to Cardiff? It's a long shot maybe, but I think he's done he's just brought the joy back, and it feels much more free than it did previously. So whatever happens, I think it's been a success for him, as you say, Fraser, unless we concede 60 at home and then the comments on Wales Online go into absolute meltdown. But it will be a very Cardiff thing.
Good spot to finish on this week. Simon, thank you for joining us on your debut.
Yes,
Fraser, nice to see you as always. Pod will be back next week, looking back on the Six Nations, but most importantly, looking back to real rugby starting again as Cardiff face Lions. Until then, good luck, Wales, on the weekend.
That was the Cardiff Central Podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.